I'd like to welcome and give the floor to Janis Volbergs, who is the CEO and co-owner of ZoomCharts, who will tell how not to be bored when working with data. Janis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Davis. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear and see me today.
Please share your presentation.
And I'll share my presentation in a second.
Yes,
Davis,
we can see you nicely.
You can see my presentation. Great. Yep. So once again, welcome everyone to Zoom Factor. This is my absolute pleasure to be here and have this presentation today, and in particular talk about the topic that is really close to me, and it's all about how to get joy from working with data. And believe me, you can. And so let me proceed. And before I proceed, I want to warn you that there's going to be two parts to my presentation. The first part of that will be somewhat scientific. We'll go deep into the way how our bodies work, but don't worry, the second part will be about the joy, and we will see how to practically apply these little hints that I'll be talking about to get to the joy part. Right, and so without any further ado, let me proceed. So, and let me change the slide, one moment. Yes, perfect.
And currently so, my face is in the slides, so please turn the small window down.
Yep. Let me do that. Is it good now?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so we can proceed. And the first question obviously is, what is a joy? So most of you already have some immediate first kind of ideas that come to your mind when you hear that word, but essentially it's very indigenous, it's very unconscious, and it comes from within. And essentially, when we're talking about the joy, it is how we react to certain stimuli that we receive through our sensory mechanisms, right? And if we didn't have this input, we weren't able to interpret that, and our bodies wouldn't be able to react on that and create this chemical reaction. So fact number one, the joy comes from our sensory network. And so when we're looking at the sense part, obviously you all know that there are five main senses that we have, right? So touch, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. Well, there are others, but those are the first ones, right? And these different senses provides us this ability to interpret what is happening around us. And because of how nature has made us evolve, we have very powerful engine in our brains that is devoted in particular for this visual interpretation. And visual interpretation is actually a very tricky subject for our brains, and therefore a very large amount of that is actually devoted for that. And we have mastered our sight to use in many different ways, right? We have the main focus, we have the peripheral vision, and we seamlessly combine all of that when we live our lives, when we interact with our world. So sight obviously is the number one source of these senses. But then obviously when you have questions, your most natural way of asking the questions is by a touch. You most probably do not remember when you were born, where you were a little child, but this is exactly what you did. You used your touch. You used to touch everything to get an idea of what that is, what you can do with that, and essentially this is how you train your essential way of living. Sight and touch combination. You see and then you touch to ask the questions, right? And so when you have this sensory information, you need to understand that our brains are set up in an interesting way. We have so-called fast thinking and slow thinking, and this is very important. So bear with me, let me explain you what is what. The fast thinking is something that we use very often to make the immediate decisions unconsciously. We use the cues that come through our sensory network to make an immediate answer. When you hear something like, what is 1 + 1, immediately you would have an answer 2, but not because you calculated, but because you already know that the answer already there. If I asked you, what is the square root of 2? Well, that's where we come to the slow thinking, because you don't have an immediate answer, most probably, except maybe a few of those who do that daily. And so to recap, the fast thinking is the one that helps us make decisions quickly, but to use the fast thinking, the way we receive information must be such that it's easy to use all of the memory and brain that we have to work with that data. And on contrary, when we are faced with the new data, with something that is difficult to quickly interpret, we need to use the frontal lobe, and using the frontal lobe means that we need to use more resources. And once we do that to analyze the data, this is very resource consumption process, and it actually creates a pain when doing so over a longer period of time, right? So this is already first kind of few ideas from my side of where I'm going with this about the fast and slow, right? Fast, that's joy, that's happiness. Slow, that's pain, that's resource intensive. All right, so carrying on from then obviously question why visualize, right? And the answer is actually very simple. Visualizations help us to use our fast thinking methodology in our brains, and visualizations give us immediate ideas about the data, about whatever is being presented, and it enables us to use the fast thinking part of our brains to work with the data. And therefore, you see the Power BI and other BI tools, they focus on, first and foremost, on having these visual representations. And this is because of this fact. It gives you this immediate ability to consume large amounts of data using the fast thinking. Of course, I must note that it's very important, therefore, for those who create the reports to be responsible, because when you're creating the visualizations, you can also provide wrong ideas using the visualizations, and therefore financial people, they typically don't like visualizations at all. They like numbers. We understand you, but salespeople and business people, they can't really go into the numbers all the time because they don't have enough time. They need to work fast, they need to act fast, and therefore visualizations is something they rely on heavily. And you as a report creator, it's your responsibility to make sure that these visualizations contain all the relevant data and something that can be consumed properly. Right, and so you might be wondering where I'm heading with this. And obviously, the next thing I want to mention is motion. And so if we're talking about the motion pictures were introduced in late 19th century already by Edison Dixon, who figured out that if you just flip through the number of pictures fast enough, then you can use so to say a biological hack to create an impression that you are seeing a motion instead of a fixed image, even though in fact what you're seeing is just a number of fixed images, right? As you know, the brain can hold a frame for about a tenth of a second, and therefore if you have at least 10 frames per second, you start to see some motion, and at 24 frames per second, you would get already somewhat smooth motion. This is used in most of the movies, but then if you want to have really smooth motion, you need to go 30 and above. That's important to remember. But to conclude on this one, motion is also important because we as human beings, we have evolved in an environment where detecting the motion is important for us for our safety, because there could be a predator there in the jungle, and it's not the image that tells that it's there, it's the motion. And again, our brain, the visual cortex, is super good at picking up the differences, and that's why even though you don't know maybe and don't even feel that, but your eyeballs are moving all the time. And it's not just because they don't have anything better to do, it's because to capture the differences, they're trying to capture the differences in the frames. So motion is super important, and it helps us to identify the changes and therefore to act on that accordingly. And so again, and when we're talking about the motion, and this slide is super important, motion must be fluent. And why? Well, it's very simple, and you must have had that feeling when, for instance, you drive on the back seat of the cab or car, and then you try to read something, right? And then what happens is that the book or the thing that you held inside your hands, it's shaking, right? And once it's shaking, the image is not stable. And once the image is not stable, our brains are asking the question of why. And because of the evolutionary processes, we didn't have like cars for like 100,000 years, right? We have them just for like a couple of 100 years or so. We haven't used to this fact that, well, that this trigger emotion could be coming from an exogenous source. And therefore, our brains think that, oh, wait a second, I'm not seeing a fluent motion anymore. So what's happening? Well, I must be sick, right? And when you have that sick feeling, it's not because you've eaten something bad. It's because your brain thinks that because you are seeing this not fluent motion, you must be poisoned. You must have ate something that is not good. And immediately you have that bad feeling, right? And so even though you maybe do not notice that that frequently on the back of the car, but when you browse the web and when you use different apps, you must have noticed that feeling that when something is not fluent, you have a bad feeling, right? And so if we're using motion must be fluent, because if it is fluent, then it causes very nice feeling, and when it's jiggery, it's causing the bad feeling, right? So even though the motion is a very powerful tool, we need to be very careful on that one. And but yeah, so the silky smooth motion is the one that really creates this satisfaction for some reason, and because when you see things flowing by, imagine like let's say a waterfall, right, or a stream or a river. When you have this fluid motion, it's very pleasing, and so it's indigenous that we like things that move smoothly and without interruptions. And now the next sense is the touch, right? And as I said, since we are born, we use touch to really do pretty much everything, right? We used to like touch things to understand what they are, what to do, to pick them up. And also now we use keyboards, and when we touch the keys, the idea is to send a command to the computer. So it's the way of interacting. It's the reverse, right? So we use the sight to get the information, but then we use the touch to ask the questions. And therefore, using the touch is the most kind of natural way of interacting with everything, and therefore your mobile devices you're using so often and you're so happy about that because you can use this natural way of asking questions. You touch and you get this response, and it feels very, very natural. If it works, right? So it must be responsive, and therefore, if you're using this responsiveness idea of and if you are having the touch interface, it's kind of similar to the sight, right? If you touch something and you get the feedback immediately, you feel good. If you touch something, but then it doesn't do what you expected, or you need to do a couple of more steps, your touch, the way of using the touch for asking questions, this process is completely ruined at that point, right? So touch is only good when you get an immediate feedback, and that's when you really kind of hook it up and you can use it naturally and you get most out of that. So sight, if you're using visuals, that helps you use the fast thinking. Motion helps you pick up the differences, and touch must be responsive. So these are ingredients that you are using every day in your lives when interacting pretty much with everything. And so if we summarize that, then to have the joy feeling, and when I'm talking about the joy is really, it originated when you do something and you get a gratification backwards from that action, right? And typically it's because you get a shot of dopamine, sometimes adrenaline, depending on what you're doing, but the dopamine is really the thing that hooks you up to whatever you are enjoying. So if something lets you use the fast thinking, you have a good feeling about that process. If you see motion over static changes, you have a good feeling because that's natural. You can see how you transition from state A to state B, right? If you can use touch that causes an instant response, again, you're happy because you can use the tools that you have since day one of your lives, right? So you can use that naturally. And of course, that's intuitive, because whenever you have a question, the first kind of internal feeling is just to touch something, to ask a question about that. And to demonstrate some of these things that I just mentioned, this is the part that I said we'll actually get onto something visual instead of just blobs of text. Let me show you a couple of demos here. Let me focus on this donut chart. And again, you must have heard that donuts are evil and they can't be used properly. Well, again, it depends on how you use that. For instance, here we're using this donut to show entire car park in Latvia, right? So one chart, one visualization, but you immediately understand everything that's going on there. You see that the Volkswagen is number one, followed by Audi, Opel, and so on. And you see the top 15 brands, and then the rest of them are in this gray area, which is others, right? normally you wouldn't care about that, but what if you could actually see what's inside there? So Zoom Charts enables you to do that. You just click on the others and watch closely, right? So I'm clicking the others and it expands. So actually, if you are interested in the other slides, you can access it just by a touch. And this is what I told you. So if you have an interest in something, just touch it, right? And similarly, if I'm interested only in the Volkswagen, well, I can just touch it. So I click on that and immediately with the news animation, I'm into the next level, right? I can see what the Volkswagen actually consists of. And there's no lag, no delay. I can click on a Golf. And similarly, I can now go into the next level. So I can see all the cars by the years of production. And just with a touch to go back, well, click in the middle and you're back. So no right clicks, nothing, just a touch. Touch-driven drill down is something that is so easy to use once you know how. And best of all of you can use this already in Power BI using the drill down donuts. So, and we encourage you to use this. And even those who don't like donuts, well, once they see how they can work with donut in this way, it changes the way how they perceive it. It's not just a visualization, it's really the tool for exploring the data, right? Similarly, in this example, we have a completely different data set. We're looking at a bank account statement, and at the top, we have this time series chart here showing the income and expense by years. And again, imagine you had a question of what happened in 2012. Normally, if you are using standard slicers, you would have to choose the beginning of 2012, then go to the end of the 2012. Well, that's about 30 clicks. Here, well, your natural response is a touch, right? So if I click 2012, notice that I'm drilling into that in a very smooth animation. So you clearly understand where you are and why you are there. It's your touch that made you go into this year to reveal what's inside there. And similarly, I can use the touch just to move things to the right or to the left, depending on where I want to go, right? And it's all touch driven. You don't have to use right clicks or complicated controls. You can use the gestures that you already know how to. And of course, when you drill into things, not only you drill into one chart, but all the other components in your report do respond. So in Power BI, therefore, you can use this time series control to show the time-based data and let users navigate the timeline easily. And once they navigate that, it also acts as a filter for the rest of the report. And a few more examples. This one is very interesting in particular because graph visualization is becoming more and more popular among business people because this lets you visualize the connections among different things and entities. In this case, you can see Julia and clients she works with and colleagues of her. And but using Zoom Charts technology, you can immediately access additional information about Julia just by, again, tapping on her. So, for instance, you can have the same drill down donut here around Julia and show what social network she's using, right? For instance, Facebook, and then what she's discussing there, what topics, and also when, right? So you can build things like these easily. This is sample data, not real data, just so the guys from the data side rest assured. Data privacy is all okay here. And finally, one little example here with the Zoom charts in a Power BI report. So a bit sad topic on one hand, but then again, even in this topic, you can have a little bit of a joy when, at least when exploring the data. So for instance, here we see the overall situation of the COVID as of yesterday. And if I'm interested only in Europe, we can use this donut here nicely, and I can just tap on Europe as you saw before, and just one tap lets me go into the Europe part, and here I can see the individual countries, and then others you can find, well, pretty much every other country, right? And so we're from Latvia, and we're happy that because of the strict restrictions that we have in place, we're doing good, and because of the other slides, I'm able to quickly navigate that, and that's how the situation looks like here in Latvia, right? So touch-driven data exploration is very important. And once you learn that and you notice that all of the things that I'm doing are accompanied by this motion, and this motion is important for you to understand what is going on, what is changing, how things are transitioning, and if ability to use just a simple touch to navigate through data, and of course on every device, right? So it's iPads, iPhones, doesn't matter. It works everywhere across every device. Once you get to know this experience, this really transforms the way how you'll think about data exploration from now on. It looks like I need to wrap up real quick. So what are the benefits of the joy? I must touch on that. That's really important. So again, activities that create you joy, chemically speaking, provide you with this dopamine effect. Well, once you do those, dopamine is injected into your body and you feel happy. If you add the joy factor to the BI reports, well, it makes the work with the reports addictive. Yeah, it might sound unusual, unheard of, but it's exactly what's happening because of the visualizations and the work, how you can work with the data. The joy that you get encourages people to come back, ask more questions, use this on the go and on their day-to-day lives to make decisions that need to be made on the data, right? So the joy factor encourages the users to come back and ask these questions. And ever more than now, it's important to make sure that companies who introduce BI really get high levels of adoption, and adding the joy factor to that is really the key to success, because if people are happy to use that, they will use it. And the more time they spend on the data, the higher the likelihood that they'll make the right decisions, and therefore your businesses will grow and have better performance, right? And so therefore, this is really the answer of also the zoom factor and what the zoom factor is. And the zoom factor is pretty much all about this joy. And we started already back in 2013 with this exact idea to create the next generation visualizations that would create this joy when working with the data, and therefore would be naturally suited for data exploration and interrogation. And so when you think about Zoom charts visuals, that's in our DNA. That's what we do. We enable you to use your natural senses to work with the data seamlessly and with a joy. And therefore, this is where we come to this touch and get it experience. And I hope that you now get it, where the touch and get it experience is coming from. So summary, we bring joy to the process of using BI, and this added factor of joy will create a positive addiction to the BI tools, and unconsciously, this joy effect will make your users to use BI more, increasing the quality of the decisions that are made based on data. So that's it. Thank you, and I wish you all to enjoy your data.
Thank you, Janis. You mentioned that this might get addictive, and you thought it sounds weird, but it doesn't sound to me weird, because if I was an executive and people usually show me static reports, and if I could just touch and get all the data and play around with the data myself, that is not anything strange to find that addictive. Yes, we quickly run through the questions. So the first question, Janis, goes to what it takes to get such experience in everyday reports companies are using, meaning that normal everyday reports are not interactive, static, and if the executives ask for information, it might take hours to get that information out. So what it takes to get such experience in every day.
Well, I mean, this is the great part, right? So Zoom charts is available for Power BI as a drop-in visual. So every report creator can just go ahead and plug those into your reports. And once the drill down visuals are there, and once the executives see how they can go into the data, well, get ready to prepare the data, because when they'll see how they can drill into the data, and once they will understand the level of control that this provides to them, you'll be thinking about where to get more data and how to combine that. But to create this interface, it's super simple. Just to drop in a visual and it works immediately out of the box.
Yes, definitely. The next one question, are these interactive charts a part of Power BI, or are they available as a standalone only?
So Zoom charts is well integrated with Power BI. Most of the things that you saw today are already available in Power BI. We are actively working on new visuals to bring into this Power BI environment. Some of the things that you saw, like donuts on the graph, that's not currently there, but it will be there maybe this year, at latest next year. We're working on that. but most of the other visuals, they are already there, and we're constantly working on making them better. And part of that, we're releasing 1.6 version sometime very soon. And those who participate in this contest, if you already downloaded the PBX file, it already contains the latest 1.6 version that brings also additional features that are not available on the app source right now. So this is an added bonus to you that you can already have your hands onto the latest and greatest.
Thank you. We have more questions from the audience. There might be time for one more, so you can still use the Q&A forum to ask questions, and we will go through them. Janis, you mentioned three main factors, so sight, motion, and touch. Is that something you think is crucial for good data visualization practices? And now that is not the norm, so will this whole procedure be a complete game changer?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to really go back to the charts and visualizations as such. And if we go really deep into the history, the first signs of charts are like back in like 17th century or so. And interestingly, that up until 2013, when zoom charts arrived, the very idea of the chart hadn't changed. It was the idea that the chart is one directional transformation of data, just to use the fast part of the brain to visualize the results. And we had this idea that we could completely transform that by designing this technology in a way that is designed for having this touch interface to ask the questions and to go on from there. So whereas traditionally the visuals are the end result, with zoom charts we encourage, and they're actually built for, it's the starting point. It's the starting point for asking the questions, for going to the data, for looking for the answers. And therefore we are using this term of the next generation, and it's not because we want to have something fancy, but it's just because that it changes the paradigm of how executives can work with the data. It's so simple as touch and get it.
And the last question before we move on to the next speaker, can you share some great feedback from executives who for more than tens of years have been used to people reporting them a completely different manner than this? And once the people start using zoom charts, there's incredible feedback. Have you had some of those stories?
Well, we have it all the time when we show this to executives, and the feedback that we get is, well, I'll use some of the words that I keep hearing most often, right? So it's sexy, it's great, it's wow, it's wonderful, and we need it now. This is what they say when they see this in action.
Okay, thank you, Janis, for this. And yes, we're unfortunately out of time. The recording of the presentation will be up on the platform tomorrow. But thank you, Janis, and we're now going to prepare for the next speaker.
Good luck, everyone, and I hope you'll make the best sales reports in the world that we've seen so far.
Thank you, Janis.